Good morning, good evening, and good night, everybody. My name is Sarah, and today we have a wrap-up for you all. Now, this is technically my first wrap-up of the year because I did not do one last month, so all of those books that I read last month will be included in this month because we wouldn't really have much to talk about otherwise. For the record, during the start of February, I got into a tiny reading slump. Essentially, I read 2 really bad books in a row, and I just picked up a third and I did not want to read it. And it just kind of sat there on my desk for a really long time. So that's why I really want to include January because I read a lot in January. So I guess with that all being said, let's dive on in. So the first book I read this year was Cross My Heart and Hope to Spy. This is book 2 in the Gallagher Girls series. I absolutely love this one. However, it's not as good as the first. So Gallagher Girls series follows this main character. She's a teenager spy. Well, she's learning to be a spy. She goes to the Gallagher Girl Academy, a school that its cover is a high-class boarding school, but in reality, it trains females to become spies. The first book, it was great. It was about Cam, our main character, learning to fall in love with a civilian. Now, minor spoilers to the end of the first book, Cam cannot be in a proper relationship, so this book we have a new love interest who I unfortunately do not like that much. I mean, he's fine, but it kind of fell into that whole oh, he's the bad boy trap, because in this book we find out that there is another spy academy, this one training boys. And the schools do an exchange, and so Cam meets one of the boys from that school, and of course, romance. It's just, I really like this series so far. It's just, I liked the first love interest better. So I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It's just, it was great, but I didn't like the main plot of the book, which was the romance. The next book I read was Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was interesting. I really don't know how to describe it. I probably wouldn't have liked it as much if I just physically read it, but I listened to this on audiobook, and of course it was Lin-Manuel Miranda who was narrating it, so we had all the authentic accents and everything, and the correct pronunciations, because guess what? This isn't a cast of white characters. I know, surprise, surprise, yes. A large portion of the story is about Dante and Ari, Aristotle. They're trying to figure out what does it mean to be Mexican enough. They were born and raised in America, and they're not really feeling their roots. And of course, Love Interest is a gay book, so yay. I supported it, I guess. I don't really know how I felt about it. It was really weird. It fit for the time, because this was, right after the Vietnam War, I think. So, it was good in that aspect. Romance is really hard for me to like, and so I'm on the edge. I'm oh, if I liked romance, this would be amazing. But it was weird because of the way it was written. I don't know. So I gave it a 4 out of 5. It was good. It just wasn't perfect. And the next book I read was Carry On. This is a reread for me. Here's the thing. I have this book, but it's at my home. It's not with me at my school. So when I was home for winter break, I was I have to reread this. I have to reread this before I go back to school because it's going to haunt me if I don't, because a new book is coming out soon, and I'm I had one day to finish this book, and I finished it. I gave it another 5 out of 5. It was amazing. It was great. So Carry On is kind of Harry Potter, but gay, and it's beautiful. And we follow our main character, Simon Snow, who is the worst chosen one to ever be chosen. And it's the start of his last year at his magical academy that he goes to. Stuff kind of has been going on for a very long time for him. First of all, he is the first magical person born of non-magical lineage, which is questionable because we don't, know his parents for the majority of the book. He's from an orphanage. And it's everyone's freaking out because, hey, this kid shouldn't be here, but he's there. And then there's this thing called the Humdrum, which is essentially this universe's Voldemort. And he's going over and trying to destroy magic, kind of. He's leaving empty pockets in the world where magic cannot exist anymore. And so Simon has to go off and try and fight the Humdrum. That's his destiny. That's his job. And unfortunately, during his final year, which is the year that we show up and listen in on, his roommate Baz, who he's pretty sure is a vampire, has disappeared. And so we spend the first half of the book with Simon and all his friends just going through like, hey, what is going on? And of course some ghosts start showing up and it's like, what is this and what is this? When Baz finally comes back, his first words is, I love him, and it's adorable. So yeah, 5 out of 5. The next book I listened to on audiobook, and that is Artemis Fowl, book 1 in the Artemis Fowl series. I read this book when I was little, like right when I was learning to read it. And I don't remember it being it. I don't remember Artemis being the way he is. Like, I knew it was like, even though Artemis is the main character, like he's the title character, we really follow more of the Fae, or the fairies, I guess. And it's just, I remembered that much, but then as I started like rereading it, listening to it again, I'm like, this is a bit different, because Artemis is an 11-year-old criminal mastermind, and he's doing all of this stuff for some unknown purpose. Like, he has all the money he wants, but for some reason he's obsessed with like getting the money of the Fae, and he goes through this huge plot which spans the entire book. And really, like, the people who he's affecting, like, those are the main characters. Like, those are the people that we root for, that we follow. And it isn't until the end that we, like, know really what's up, and it's amazing. I gave it a 4 out of 5 because it was, like, I was a little off to it because I didn't really remember that. But, I mean, I would gladly continue with the series. Next book I read was Not Your Sidekick. I did a full review on this. I don't really want to go into too much because, again, I had a full review on it. I will leave the link for that down below. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I had too much expectations going into this book because it's sheer effort I put into getting this book. It put my expectations way too high. It's essentially a world where superheroes are common. We follow our main character who, hey, guess what? Doesn't have superpowers, even though she's from a family of superheroes. And so she ends up taking an internship for her local supervillain. Along the way, there's some romance ensues, and of course it's a female-female romance because I've been looking for that. If you follow a lot of my videos, you know I recently noticed, even though I have a lot of LGBT books on my shelf, I don't really have a lot of that L. Like, there's very few female-female romances, so I've really been going out of my way to try and find that. So yeah, 4 out of 5, continuing on. The next book, this is still January by the way, is Hawkeye number 5. This is the one with Kate Bishop and Jessica Jones team up to go solve a mystery. Kate Bishop, which is like the female Hawkeye that not many people know about, she isn't really spending her time so much as a superhero as really she's spending it as a private detective. I don't really rate comic books, but this was quite an enjoyable one. I really am liking Kate Bishop. I want her to have more of a run in the Hawkeye comics, but yeah, this is a pretty good one. And the last book I read in January was Shadow and Bones by Leigh Bardugo. Okay. This book confuses me. This book confuses me so much because the first half was like, this exists. I was like, I felt like I had to read this series because I love Six of Crows, but they didn't explain any of the magic system in that. Like, okay, that's fine. But once I found out that Shadow and Bones was supposedly supposed to explain the magic system, I was like, oh, maybe I should read that. It doesn't. It doesn't even bother to explain the magic system, even though the main character is some sort of like extraordinary person who shouldn't have the powers that she has. I mean, it existed. It existed. And in the middle part, I'm like, oh, this is kind of bad. Like, it wasn't like bad, but it was like, I wasn't liking it. And I'm like, I have to push through. I'm like, I'm more than halfway done. I need to get to the end. Because if I make it past the halfway mark, I feel dedicated. Like, okay, the romance sucks. The characters are annoying. This is supposed to be Russian-inspired, but I don't see anything related to Russia other than the fact that it's cold out. But I'm just sitting here, I'm like, okay, we can keep going. We can keep going through this. Now I get to the end. And the end is actually interesting. And I'm so confused. I'm like, do I continue with this series? Do I not? I mean, the covers are beautiful, but I know if I ever do an unhaul, this would be the first book to go. So I'm like, okay. Oh, one more thing. There's this thing in the book, like you can see on the cover, it's like a stag, and the whole thing they're trying to hunt the stag down for is for the antlers. So I'm like, hey, guess what? Stags shed their antlers. I get it, it's supposed to be mythical, and that might not be what it does, but you go through all this trouble hunting it down, and I'm like, hey, just pick up the antlers off the floor. Like, it's not that hard, okay? It's just, there's a lot of things nitpicky about it, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 simply because of that ending. It like actually intrigued me, but I just, I mean, it's probably closer to, it's like a 2.5, really, because it's just not that enjoyable for me. And I know a lot of people like this series, and I'm like, I'd rather read Six of Crows. Like, Six of Crows was interesting, and so how do I get it, author growth, but yeah, okay, we're moving on. So, I went from, okay, this exists, into February. Like, my mind was already like, I started reading Long May She Reign. This was a concerning thing, because I do not like politics in my books. I don't like political dramas. I don't like I don't need that. I don't need that in my books. And it's a YA book, and I'm like, ugh. Long May She Reign really just follows this character who was like 36 in line for the throne, and the king holds this huge banquet, and she ends up having to leave early, and everyone at that banquet ends up dying, and she is the only person left eligible to take the throne. And it's just, okay, that's an interesting enough summary, but they do this thing where it's like, oh, wow, I want to be a scientist. Like, before she was put onto the throne, she was planning on running away on her 18th birthday, becoming a scientist. Aluminum had just been discovered, so she was testing that with all her experiments. And I'm like, okay, we have a smart character, and then you put her on the throne, completely out of her element, by the way. Like, I get it. She was not going to understand what this life was like. She was not raised to take over the throne. And she's just, she's supposed to be so smart. She's supposed to be so smart. And just the way she acts, and it's just so, I want to say unrealistic, but that's not quite the right word. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. There's also the fact that her love interest is technically like her second cousin. Like, I get it, that's illegal. But yeah, that was just kind of like making me feel a little bit ucky. So I DNF this book at like 50%. I don't rate books I DNF because, hey, maybe the ending was good. I just didn't get there. But it just wasn't good. I think my whole problem was it was political. I don't like political books, so yeah. Next book I read, continuing that really, this book really cinched the fact that I was like, none of it, like the past 3 books I've read were not good books, and this was Daughter of the Pirate King. I DNF this book. It's like, oh, cool, a book about pirates. I love books about pirates. I love stories on the sea. Here's the thing. On the cover of the book, it says, readers may rejoice, we now have a female Captain Jack Sparrow. The reason why Pirates of the Caribbean worked was the fact that Captain Jack Sparrow was not the main character. That's why all the sequels were subpar while the first one was so good. He is that side character who is just amazing. He doesn't have a place in the spotlight. He doesn't take center stage because he's not meant to. That's not that character type. That's not his place. And this book tried to do that, and like all the others, it wasn't good. Yeah, there was the romance. That was upsetting. I mean, I'm really hit or miss with romance. Because, like, the fact that it exists, like, okay, I'm willing to accept that characters have feelings. We can move on with that. But the way that they treat this character, like, she wittingly boards an enemy ship, so she's taken, like, hostage or whatever, and she ends up falling in love with the captor, like, hey, look at how people react to that in Beauty and the Beast. That's not a good trope to do. And I get it, it's supposed to be hate to love. It's not a good trope to do. And it has this whole thing where, like, her father is actually the pirate king. Like, people respect him like a king. He owns the water. That only happened once. and that was a female pirate in the Chinese Sea. And the government asked her to retire, and she got to keep all her money. And like, hey, if you're gonna do that, maybe use a female character and actually be creative. Wow, I'm sorry, I'm feeling salty today. I really am. But yeah, DNF'd it. Didn't get any stars. Romance, ew. Jack Sparrow is not meant to be the main character. I mean, it could have been good. I just didn't finish it. And the final book that has saved me, Will Save the Galaxy for Food. This book, I feel like I need to reread it because of how I was feeling. Like the past 3 books in a row were not good books. I went into this one like not really paying attention to the first half of the book. And so I missed a lot of the character introductions. I missed how we got into certain situations. Like, this was entirely my fault. Like, I was zoning out while I was flipping through pages. But the ending, like, I don't know how we got there, but that ending was amazing. Like, I need to reread this book because I need to know how we got to this amazing, like it's just, okay, I need to tell you what this book is about, first of all. So Will Save the Galaxy for Food is a science fiction satire that essentially follows this star pilot who used to be one of the best back in the Golden Age. It's called the Golden Age should tell you the fact that, hey, that's not like that anymore. Quantum tunneling has become a thing. People can travel across the galaxy in nanoseconds. And so that leaves all the star pilots out of a job. And so, you have a group of highly skilled, but very specifically skilled people, and you suddenly lose their job. Majority of them become pirates. But our main character's like, that's not really the life I want to live. So he stays on Luna, the moon, and he tries to give tours of different planets to different people. And it's like, okay, that's how he's making his money. At the start of the book, however, he gets kind of caught negotiating with pirates, like, hey, want to spook my passengers so that I can give them an actual thrill for once in their life. And then, like, he gets caught doing that. And so he gets a court summoning. That court summoning doesn't happen until the end of the book, but he's faced with the fact that he's going to have to sell everything if he wants to, you know, afford going to court, afford having lawyers. And he kind of, like, gets to this point where it's like, oh, wow, I'm kind of screwed. So he spends the rest of the day, like, in the bar drinking, and some girl approaches him. And she's like, hey, I got scammed. Can you help me? Can you pretend to be someone so my boss doesn't fire me? And he's like, okay, sure. He's like, I'm good at this. I can fake enough. Like, I've done it for the past few years. And so he goes in to this person's, like, meeting, like they're having a nice fancy dinner, and it turns out he's actually tasked to impersonate someone kind of famous and kind of hated by the majority of star pilots. So, I think his name is, like, Jacqueline or whatever. So, like, Jacqueline's the guy who he has to impersonate. And Jacqueline used to be a star pilot, and now he sells books, like falsifying tales, elaborating things. He's essentially, like, selling cowboy books, really. Most of the people who used to be these pilots kind of hate him because you're saying you're preserving the memory, but you're preserving the wrong memory. The memory is incorrect. So everyone hates him except for the people who don't know what it was actually like to be a pilot. So this boss, like this girl was hiring him for, was like, hey, I need you to entertain my son. The guy's like, I mean, I could do that. Why not? Stuff happens. I don't know what happens. Like, this is the part where I zoomed out. I read the bit of the middle, zoomed out, and I was like not paying attention. I'm like, stuff happens. They go places. And like, apparently he accidentally like kidnapped somebody important, but he really was just like, oh, this kid who I'm in charge of entertaining wants to bring a friend on board. Okay. Apparently that was an important person. And so, long story short, the ending is just amazing. And it's so lovely, and it's so great, and it's like, it's a satire, obviously. It's not going to be that great space opera, but at the same time, I'm like, this really does remind me, like, it has a lot of the same aspects that you see in classic sci-fi, like the stainless steel rat and everything. The main thing that bothered me was the fact that, like, the girl who comes up and hires him, we don't really know her age. She's older than a teenager, which are, like, because she's, like, the nanny for the kids that the guy ends up bringing on his ship. He ends up bringing, like, he got, like, a horde of children behind him, really, he does. But she's younger than the star pilot, so she's, like, mid-20s, I guess. I don't really know. But there are some comments about sex in there, and I'm like, I don't know the age of this character, but it kind of makes me uncomfortable. So if that is something you don't like in your books, this is not the book for you, but it's only like 2 comments that I paid attention to. So yeah, I actually really like this book. I do plan on probably listening to it on audiobook at some point in my life because I want to know what I missed. But it was the book to get me out of a reading slump. Like, hey, this book is good. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because, again, I don't feel qualified because I don't know what happened in the middle, but I liked it. It was a good book. So yeah, overall, I read 3 books in February and 7 books in January. So that's 10 books total past 2 months. Tad bit behind on my reading goal because I want to read 70 books this year. That might take a bit, but yeah, I'm getting some good books out there. It's like actually enjoyable for me. So hopefully the reading slump is over because I have some important books I want to read next, and I really want to pay attention to what is going on in them. And yeah, I mean, I gave a lot of books like 4 and 3 stars, and everything else I just DNF'd because I was not having it. I'm like, if this book isn't good, I have a lot of books I gotta read. I'm not finishing it. So those books all went to a good home, don't worry. But yeah, thank you guys all so much for watching. If you liked this video, go ahead and leave that down in the comment section down below. And while you're there, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And as always, good night, good evening, and good morning, everybody.